Wedding days harbored unique and often unseen fatal dangers, moments where the ritual of celebration collided with hidden risk. Couples planned for forever, and some died on the same day they promised it. 7 documented cases traced failures of venue design, tradition, and judgment, showing how romance became recklessness. The countdown began at number 7, each story proving that even the happiest day could become deadly. On May 14, 2017, guests gathered at the historic Langley Mansion for a wedding that had taken over a year to plan. The bride was Emily Harper, 29, who chose a 12-foot cathedral train for her processional entrance, a detail meant to create a dramatic moment as she descended the mansion's grand marble staircase. The staircase was a local landmark, 40 steps of polished stone with no railings, spanning a total drop of 10.5 meters. 250 guests, including Emily's parents and her fiancé of 6 years, waited below as the processional music echoed through the hall. As Emily stepped onto the top stair, her heel caught the trailing edge of her gown. In a sudden instant, the fabric pulled taut and jerked her balance. She tumbled forward and fell the entire length of the staircase in a rapid cascade of impacts, striking each step until her body came to rest at the base with no movement. Witnesses described a series of blunt force impacts against the marble. Paramedics arrived at 3:17 p.m., 4 minutes after the fall. The medical examiner recorded severe cranial trauma and instantaneous death. The wedding was halted. Investigators later uncovered prior reports of slips on the same staircase and a history of ignored recommendations to install railings. The venue faced a lawsuit and permanent closure. The groom, who had watched from the altar, never remarried and began long-term therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder. June 22, 2019. At a rural farm outside Lexington, a white tent stretched across the grass, sheltering 180 guests from the summer heat. The reception had moved outdoors for dinner and toasts. Michael Grant, age 31, stood near the aluminum center pole, glass raised, preparing to deliver his speech as best man. He was the groom's college roommate and business partner, chosen for his humor and loyalty. The sky had darkened and distant thunder sounded, but the celebration pressed on. No backup plan existed for severe weather, and the tent's metal frame, supplied by a local vendor, lacked grounding rods or surge protection. But as the storm peaked, at 6:18 in the evening, a bolt of lightning carrying 300 million volts struck the pole less than 2 feet from Michael Grant. The current, peaking at nearly 100,000 amperes, traveled rapidly through the conductive frame. Michael's hand gripped the pole at the moment of impact, creating a direct path to ground. He collapsed instantly, suffering immediate ventricular fibrillation. Emergency medical technicians arrived at 6:26 in the evening and attempted defibrillation with an automated external defibrillator, but no pulse returned. 2 guests standing nearby sustained burns and temporary paralysis, but they survived. Michael was pronounced dead at 6:34 in the evening, just 16 minutes after the strike. The bride was 6 months pregnant. She continued the reception at her parents' urging, but the event was shadowed by shock. The investigation revealed that the tent had not met updated safety codes requiring grounding for large outdoor structures. Within a year, statewide regulations mandated grounding systems for all event tents, a direct response to the fatal oversight that ended Michael Grant's life on what was meant to be a day of celebration. August 17, 2021. The garden at Crestwood Estate had filled with the sound of a string quartet as 205 guests took their seats for the wedding of Rachel Lynn, age 26, and her fiancé Jason Wu. Rachel's younger sister Megan, age 24, stood beside her as maid of honor. The sisters had grown up inseparable, their bond a defining feature of the day. The couple had chosen an outdoor ceremony at the top of the estate's terraced lawn, the aisle framed by hydrangeas and a view of the valley below. Behind the scenes, a refrigerated catering truck loaded with reception food and weighing 3,200 kilograms was parked at the top of a 12-degree incline, the estate's main driveway. But as the officiant began the opening words at 4:11 p.m., a mechanical failure went unnoticed. The truck's parking brake, last serviced 18 months earlier, failed. Witnesses later described a faint metallic clatter, then the vehicle rolling silently down the slope. In less than 7 seconds, the truck accelerated to an estimated 35 miles per hour. It broke through a hedge and crashed directly into the ceremony, striking Rachel and Megan at the altar. The impact produced catastrophic blunt force trauma. Emergency responders arrived and attempted resuscitation, but both sisters suffered severe craniofacial trauma, bilateral skull fractures, and massive intracranial hemorrhage. They were pronounced dead at the scene by paramedics at 4:23 p.m. The groom, standing only feet away, survived physically unharmed, but required sedation for acute psychological shock and was later treated for post-traumatic stress disorder. An investigation found the catering company had ignored multiple brake maintenance violations and had failed to use wheel chocks on the steep grade. The collision had been captured on security cameras and was later used as evidence in a $42 million wrongful death lawsuit filed by the Lin family. The estate canceled all future events, and the catering company lost its license. Jason Wu was hospitalized twice for suicide attempts in the following year. The Lin family lost both daughters in a single afternoon, a loss that no settlement could repair. September 4th, 2022. The converted warehouse at 19th and Ash had become a destination for couples drawn to its industrial glass floor, a centerpiece suspended above a 20-foot drop to the wine cellar below. That evening, 160 guests gathered for the first dance of Olivia and Daniel Mercer, both 28, architects who had met during graduate school. Their choice of venue was deliberate, a celebration of design, risk, and transparency. The glass panel measured 12 by 12 feet and was advertised as engineered to exceed safety standards, though no official inspection had ever been filed with the city. The panel spanned the ballroom and sat directly over the 20-foot void to the cellar. At 8:42 p.m., the DJ cued the song Thinking Out Loud. The couple stepped onto the panel, surrounded by friends and family in formal attire. As they moved through the opening bars, the crowd closed in along the edges, cell phones raised. The panel flexed beneath their weight, but no alarms sounded. Unbeknownst to the guests, the glass had been installed with a live load rating of 40 pounds per square foot, half the minimum required by local building code for assembly occupancy. The original engineering plans had called for 4-ply laminated safety glass, but invoices later revealed a substitution: 3-ply tempered glass with a critical splice running across the center, unsupported by steel framing. At 8:44 p.m., as the couple spun near the midpoint, a sharp crack echoed through the hall. Witnesses described a spiderweb of fractures radiating outward from the splice, followed by a sudden collapse. Olivia and Daniel plunged 18 feet and landed on the concrete cellar floor below. Paramedics arrived at 8:49 p.m. Both sustained multiple traumatic injuries, including pelvic fractures, internal hemorrhaging, and closed head trauma. Despite aggressive resuscitation, Daniel was pronounced dead at 9:27 p.m. Olivia was pronounced dead at 9:41 p.m. in the trauma bay. An investigation by city officials found the venue had operated without a certificate of occupancy since its conversion in 2018. The glass floor had never undergone required load testing, and the substitution of materials was traced to cost-cutting measures by the owner. The building was condemned within a week. The Mercers' families filed a $28 million lawsuit, citing gross negligence and code violations. The venue's closure left a void in the local event scene, and the case became a reference point for structural safety in non-traditional wedding venues. October 9, 2022. The timber-framed barn at Willow Creek hosted 190 guests for the wedding of Tyler James, 27, and his longtime partner, Lauren. The evening tradition was set for 11 p.m., a sparkler send-off where guests formed a tunnel of light for the newlyweds' exit. Tyler chose to wear his late grandfather's vintage tuxedo, a sentimental gesture that became central to the tragedy. The jacket and trousers were made of 1970s polyester, and they carried a warning tag about flammability, but no one present was aware of the risk. The formal vintage fabric looked elegant under the barn lights, and the decision to wear the heirloom piece was framed as a meaningful nod to family. As the barn doors opened, guests lit 36-inch sparklers, and the air filled with smoke and the crackle of burning metal. The couple stepped into the tunnel, surrounded by friends and family, waving the sparklers overhead. At 11:04 p.m., a stray ember landed on Tyler's left sleeve. Polyester, with an ignition temperature near 452 degrees Celsius, ignited within seconds. The flame raced across the synthetic fibers, engulfing Tyler's jacket and spreading to his trousers before he could react. Lauren attempted to help, but the rapid combustion forced her back. Guests screamed for water and blankets, and the fire consumed 45% of Tyler's total body surface area before it was extinguished with a tablecloth and a pitcher of ice water. Paramedics arrived at 11:11 p.m. and transported Tyler to the regional burn center. The sparks and smoke that moments earlier had seemed celebratory became evidence in a fatal sequence. Tyler was admitted in critical condition and intubated for airway protection. Over the next 8 days, he underwent multiple surgeries for debridement and skin grafting. Despite aggressive fluid resuscitation and infection control, he developed acute respiratory distress syndrome and septic shock. On October 17th at 4:27 a.m., Tyler was pronounced dead due to multi-organ failure secondary to extensive thermal injury. Lauren suffered minor burns to her hands and was treated and released. The wedding was never officially completed. Investigators determined that the vintage tuxedo polyester fabric, combined with open flame sparklers, created a lethal hazard. No warnings about clothing materials had been provided by the venue or the rental company. In response, the state fire marshal issued an immediate ban on sparkler send-offs at licensed event venues. The barn's insurance carrier settled with the James family. Lauren, citing severe post-traumatic stress disorder, annulled the marriage but chose to keep Tyler's last name. The case prompted a nationwide reassessment of pyrotechnic wedding traditions and the hidden dangers of formal attire. What had been intended as a joyful exit became a devastating reminder that celebration and risk can collide, and that a single ember can change a life. On September 12, 2023, the gardens at Silver Ridge Country Club were arranged for a sunset photo session. 173 guests mingled on the lawn as the newlyweds prepared for formal portraits. The bride, Hannah Lee, age 24, stood with her husband and the bridal party awaiting the photographer's direction. The photographer operated a commercial-grade drone weighing 2.7 kilograms and positioned the device 80 feet above the group to capture a sweeping aerial shot. The drone was powered by a lithium polymer battery and hovered in place as the photographer adjusted camera settings from a tablet. At 7:19 p.m., the drone battery indicator dropped without warning from 18% to critical. Witnesses reported a sudden whine from the motors as the drone lost power. The device tilted, lost altitude control, and began a rapid, uncontrolled descent. With no manual override available, the drone reached an estimated terminal velocity of 25 meters per second before striking Hannah on the right side of her head and neck. The impact force, calculated near 850 joules, exceeded the threshold for fatal cranio-cervical injury. The spinning propellers inflicted deep lacerations, and the main body delivered blunt force trauma, resulting in atlanto-occipital dislocation, a separation of the skull from the spine. Hannah collapsed immediately. The groom and two bridesmaids, standing less than 1 meter away, witnessed the incident at close range. Emergency medical services were called at 7:20 p.m. Paramedics arrived at 7:26 p.m. and initiated advanced airway management, but the injury was not survivable. Pulse and respiration were absent by the 90-second mark. Hannah was pronounced dead at 7:31 p.m. The entire sequence, including the impact and emergency response, was recorded by the drone's onboard camera. The footage later leaked online and was viewed over 40 million times within 3 days, sparking a wave of public outrage and debate. The investigation revealed the drone operator lacked FAA Part 107 certification and had ignored multiple low battery warnings prior to takeoff. The drone's manufacturer had issued a recall for battery packs prone to sudden voltage drops, but the unit in use had not been serviced. The Lee family filed a $15 million wrongful death lawsuit against both the photographer and the country club, citing negligence and lack of safety protocols. In the aftermath, the state of California enacted a ban on drone photography at all licensed wedding venues, and the photographer faced criminal charges for reckless endangerment. Hannah's death became the most widely documented single-victim wedding fatality, its digital record ensuring a legacy of caution in the age of modern celebration. October 14, 2024. The ballroom at St. Helena's Event Center shimmered with candlelight. 220 guests had gathered for the first dance of Julia Bennett, 25, and her husband Ryan Calloway, 29. The couple had met at a volunteer event 6 years earlier. Their engagement had been announced the previous winter, and the wedding had been planned with meticulous attention to detail, including a live orchestra, a choreographed dance, and a live stream broadcast to more than 800 remote friends and family. Julia was 6 weeks pregnant, a fact known only to her parents and her maid of honor. The newlyweds stepped onto the polished parquet floor as the opening notes of the song "Endless Love" played. At 8:17 p.m., as guests circled the dance floor, Ryan reached into his jacket. Without warning, he drew a compact 9mm handgun from a concealed holster. He fired 2 shots at close range, both striking Julia in the chest. She collapsed instantly. Ryan then turned the weapon on himself and discharged a single round into his head. The entire sequence lasted less than 12 seconds. The music stopped and panic erupted. Guests screamed and rushed to the exits. The live stream continued, broadcasting the incident in real time to viewers across the country. Emergency services were called at 8:18 p.m. Paramedics arrived at 8:23 p.m. Julia was found unresponsive, with penetrating thoracic trauma and absent vital signs. Ryan exhibited a single gunshot wound to the right temple, with no spontaneous respiration and no cardiac activity. Both were pronounced dead at the scene by 8:29 p.m. The coroner later confirmed Julia's pregnancy, adding another layer to the loss. The investigation found that Ryan had a documented history of paranoid schizophrenia, diagnosed 5 years earlier. He had discontinued his medication 3 weeks before the wedding, a decision known to his immediate family but concealed from Julia and her parents. Medical records and pharmacy logs confirmed a lapse in treatment, and interviews with relatives described recent episodes of delusional thinking and social withdrawal. The firearm had been purchased legally through a private sale, exploiting a loophole that did not require a background check or disclosure of mental health history. The live stream footage was downloaded and circulated online, accumulating 1.5 million views within 48 hours. Social media and news outlets debated the responsibilities of families, mental health providers, and event venues in preventing such tragedies. In the weeks that followed, 3 states introduced legislation mandating mental health disclosure for marriage license applicants and restricting firearm access for individuals with certain psychiatric diagnoses. St. Helena's Event Center was permanently closed, and the building was demolished 6 months later. A memorial garden now stands on the site, dedicated to Julia, Ryan, and their unborn child. The Bennett and Calloway families released a joint statement calling for greater awareness and transparency in addressing mental illness and gun safety at public gatherings. The incident remained the most widely documented wedding day fatality, its legacy measured in both personal loss and legislative change. Across all 7 tragedies, one pattern stood out. Joy and danger often occupied the same space, yet overlooked details, ignored warnings, unaddressed risks, and concealed struggles turned celebration into catastrophe. Weddings magnified the cost of neglect because everyone expected only happiness. Lives were changed, laws were rewritten, and memories were haunted. In moments built for forever, even a single misstep could rewrite fate. Cherish what mattered and never mistake tradition for safety. Click to see more and discover additional devastating stories that proved how fragile celebration could be.